Please watch what you're saying. Today is hopefully our last lesson about keeping kosher. I think it's lesson number 9 already. It's really a whole series we did on this, which was very exciting, and we started, seeing how keeping kosher in the Bible was, and we saw that there's very little evidence to that, and how it evolved into this whole thing that we have, separate, dishes and silverware and pots and pans, and how did the Jewish people expand on that, which was very interesting. And last week we were even in the kitchen of this congregation, and we saw what it means to keep a kosher kitchen. I really hope we're able to finish today, and a lot of it, depends on you and the amount of questions that you ask or don't ask. But feel free, if we need another session, we will. And next week, if we will start a new topic, we will start. I think we're going to moving to the Jewish life cycle, and we're going to talk about what happens from the time you're born until the time you pass away, and hopefully in between you have, a bris, and what do you do for a daughter, and bar and bat mitzvahs and conversion and getting married, and if God forbid you get divorce, visiting the sick. Yeah, it's not so bad. I did it. Okay. But yeah.
Are you
bragging? Yeah, you don't have.
It's a way of life.
And what happens in a Jewish divorce? How does that happen, etc.? If God forbid someone commits suicide, talking about the funeral, talking about the shiva, and all these things from the time you're born to the time you die in 1 hour. No, we'll probably have a few more sessions. We'll probably take 5 or 6 sessions to do that.
Does it
But
talk at all about before you're born?
before you're born,
Like, when does life start?
when does
Well, just behaviors.
Oh my God, let's not do that.
The woman's pregnant, you're in the womb.
well, no, that's not so much life cycles. Yeah, but we're talking about a human being, and it's interesting because I see a lot. We'll talk about this whole notion of which I just got to learn here about baby showers, which is not a Jewish custom. I don't know if Jews do it, but we'll talk about that. Why? Right?
Yes.
Never in Chicago.
Oh,
By
what
the
about
time I was a teenager,
Yeah.
they were coming around.
what about New York?
Yeah.
Reveals now.
Yeah.
They got it with some boy.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah, we don't. That's not part of the Jewish custom, but we'll talk about that as well. Okay, but to conclude, let's conclude first. Do you want to turn on the air conditioning a little bit, Larry? Yeah, not too not too cold. Yeah,
75.
75 is okay.
Want me to leave it?
Oh, no, it should be like 72.
Oh, that's really cool.
72 is cold.
Yeah.
So maybe 73. Oh, okay, I could take it off. Okay, so we're now on page 325. The reason I'm just reminding, especially those who are new here today, the reason we're reading the article is because it's very condensed, and it's a very good article, but there are a lot of details about it that need to be expand on. So that's why we are reading here as well. And we are at the bottom of page 325, where we talked about last time, and we got to the third paragraph from the end of page 325, where it says sinks, okay? Sinks should be treated similarly. Only one kind of dish should be washed at a single time. All surfaces must be cleaned thoroughly between food types. The use of separate sinks racks is highly recommended. So just like we said that there are dishwashers, and in a kosher home, yeah, we're on page 325. Okay, 325 at the bottom. You can help him find it. Okay. And we said that there are dishwashers. There's some rabbinic authorities that say you can only use the dishwasher for meat dishes, and then you have to switch it when you want to have dairy dishes. But we also said that's more like the Ashkenazi approach. The Sephardi approach is actually more lenient, and it allows you to put dairy and meat dishes together at the same time. And the same is also with the sinks, especially if the sink is made of stainless steel. Okay, in Hebrew we say nerosta. I don't know, like nirost. I don't know what the material is. It's not a name. It's not a Hebrew name. It's something maybe in Latin. In Latin.
It's the smell.
No, it's the iron. The nirosta. Yeah, it's like. But that means stainless steel, and the thinking is that does not absorb any food particles, so therefore you could put, you don't have to worry about them transferring from one to the other. So that's why the Sephardi approach is more lenient. Lenient on this. Yeah, so you could use the same dishwasher for the same dish load, the dishwasher load. You can use it for meat dishes and dairy dishes. You could put it at the same time. Okay, that's unlike the Ashkenazi approach. That's how I do it in my house. So I think now it's warmer even, right? No, it's okay. It's cooling down. Oh, okay.
Let me check.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Cooling down.
It's cooling down. We're good. Okay, I'm continuing on page 325. Freshly washed dish towels may be used with any type of dish rather than constantly changing towels after a single use. However, many people have different colored towels for meat and dairy use. The same is true for pot holders. Again, I'm surprised that this is the approach that conservative movement has chosen to put in its in its main book about keeping kosher, the observant life. I don't really see any necessity for having separate towels or pot holders, etc. It is customary to in some homes to have it separate, but it's not really a must. So I think putting it in the book here makes it a little bit more difficult for people who want to just start keeping kosher. So I'm just making that as a note.
For Ashkenazi, people have separate and Sephardic don't, or do you even know?
It's a more Ashkenazi thing. Like the Ashkenazi are more, excuse me for saying, like more obsessed, I think, with like the separation.
Yeah.
And the Sephardi are less.
It's also more expensive. Okay, this is after space.
Yeah, space. Yeah. Right, exactly. Okay, now we're at the bottom of page 325. The last paragraph. A special law governs knives used to cut foods called davar harif. Davar harif means like sharp tasting foods, such as onions or garlic. Okay, and these special rules apply because, we turn to page 326, because item considered davar harif, a sharp food, is deemed capable of absorbing other foodstuffs, even in minuscule quantities. So the reason we do keep separate knives is because we are concerned when you cut something that's very sharp, that absorbs more into the knife. And now, is that true also physically? I am not sure about that, but the knives that they had in the Middle Ages and in the time of the Talmud, it was true. Okay, the knives would really absorb it, and it would be much more difficult to get it out of the knife. So if I would cut like a cheese, okay, with one of these old knives that you see in museums, the cheese would definitely stick to the knife, and it would be much harder to take it, especially if it would be warm. If it's like a warm piece of meat and I cut it and it's very hard, and then it sticks, so it's harder to get it out. And that's why you would use like separate sets of knives, especially for things that are hot and sharp, that they absorb it even more.
There was no stainless steel.
There was no stainless steel, right? That's a modern invention for sure.
Modern ceramic knives, are they considered to absorb or not?
Ceramics in general it absorbs. Okay. Now, to what degree? It's like with ceramic dishes, so it's like falls under the same category. Okay, so we're now on page 326, the first paragraph. Therefore, it is a good idea to use parve knives to cut onions or to chop garlic, because using a meat or dairy knife would, depending on which knife was used, give the cut onion itself the status of a meat or dairy foodstuffs, and etc. So basically, once you cut those onions with a dairy knife, it makes it under the category of made with dairy utensil, and therefore you won't be able to use it for the opposite kind of food. So in this case, for a meat meal. If you've done that and it's like after fact, I would say it's okay. And maybe not all rabbis would say it's okay, but I think if you can assure that the knife was clean, and it's one of these new stainless steel knives, I would think it would be okay to do it.
What about Teflon on pots and pans?
That's a very good reason to say that it's easier to that if you made a mistake like that, and the pot was not used for more than 24 hours, then if you've made that mistake, you can use that food, and it's easier to kosher it as well. Now we're
Rabbi,
going.
also horseradish is also supposed to be separate, right?
That's right.
Horseradish grain, yeah.
Yeah, they're considered sharp as well. Okay, we now move to page 328, and that's because we covered the rest of what we're skipping. We covered last week in our lesson in the kitchen. So on page 328 at the bottom where it says appliances, we're now going to go into a set of appliances and how do you kosher them. Okay, so refrigerators and freezers. To ready a refrigerator for use in a kosher kitchen, it should be emptied, then washed inside thoroughly with soapy water and rinsed. Wire or glass shelves should be cleaned and rinsed. Okay, very easy. There's nothing more than cleaning it, basically, which is what we also do for Passover. When you want to kosher a refrigerator for Passover, this is all you would do. Freezers should be defrosted fully and washed thoroughly. Special care must be taken to clean the ice storage bins and automatic ice makers, and to clean out the crumbs from seams and corners. Okay, so basically the same. Okay, on page 329, dishwashers. Dishwashers may be koshered by cleaning them as thoroughly as possible, taking special care to score the inside area around the drain and the filters, and one should then run the machine through a full cycle with detergent, leaving the racks in place but empty of dishes. And after 24 hours of not being used, the dishwasher should then again be run, again with nothing but the racks inside, and then dried at the highest heat available. Okay, so they're saying to do it twice. I think doing it once is enough as well. Ovens and stones, it's a little bit more complicated.
I'm
Sorry?
just wondering, I mean, there's a lot of cleaning involved. I wonder for those people who are ecologically oriented, you know, how do they address some of these things? You know, running an empty cycle, for example, on its face is a waste of water.
Yeah, but you know, you're required by your washing machine company to do it anyhow. Every 6 months, you're supposed to run an empty cycle. Oh yeah,
You didn't read the book. I never
Read-
read that.
read the manual. And you have to and you have to buy a special capsule that washes the whole dishwasher. Yeah, you have to do it.
Scour, not school.
Scour. Oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me with the English. I knew that.
It's something that.
Okay, koshering ovens and stoves, we're on page 329, a little bit more difficult. To ready a self-cleaning oven for use in a kosher home, the inside must first be wiped free of all visible food particles and drippings. The self-cleaning cycle is then run with racks still in the oven. If one follows the manufacturer's recommendation that racks not be in the oven during the cleaning cycle, one must purchase new racks or use a blowtorch as described below. Okay, so we talked about the blowtorch. So if you don't want to put the racks in the oven, so you take a blowtorch and you make sure that all parts of the racks are sort of like it goes
Also,
to
make sure
them.
you're not gonna burn down the house.
Yes.
See this? This is.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Oh, oh wow.
What blew up?
Okay.
That blew up years and years ago.
Oh yeah, that's
They
crazy.
did that.
To ready a non-self-cleaning oven for use, the inside must first be wiped free of all visible food particles and drippings. An oven cleaner may then be used to clean the oven and the racks. After being cleaned, the oven must be heated to the highest temperature possible and then left for 30 minutes. The broiler must be run at full heat with the door closed and the racks in place minimally for 15 minutes. Alternately, one may use a blowtorch to heat all surfaces of the oven and racks until they are hot enough to ignite a piece of tissue on contact. Care must be taken, however, not to singe the gaskets around the door. Okay, I would do, if you do that, I would do that, of course, very carefully. To prepare a gas stovetop for use in a kosher home, the underburner bowls must first be scoured thoroughly or replaced. The area under the cooktop must then be cleaned thoroughly. Finally, each burner must be left burning on its highest setting until the pot grids glow red. Okay, so it's much more difficult to kosher a oven, but it is done. You know, we've done it our whole lives in my whole life in our home, and then there's like my dad always took out like a blowtorch and would take it out to the porch and sort of like burn the parts, and then and that's how you clean the oven and the stovetop as well. I did not do it that way. I went to someone and I paid them to do it. Okay, but my dad really loved doing it with the blowtorch, and I loved as a boy watching him do it with the blowtorch.
Some of these things could be quite dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Really.
Well, he knew what we all survived.
Appliances who've never been touched.
No, with a new oven, you could run it through one cycle, but you don't have to kosher a new oven in that sense. Some people say you do. To kosher an electric stove with heating coils, the underburner bowls and drip pans must be thoroughly scoured or replaced. The area under the cooktop must then be cleaned thoroughly, and each burner must be scoured and then turned on at its highest setting for at least 10 minutes.
But it's
Okay.
impossible. Most of the electric stoves these days are sealed. There's no way for drips to get down.
Okay, to kosher an electric stove with a glass top, that's what you're talking about, Jerry. The top must first be clean according to the manufacturer's directions. Each burner must then be left on its highest setting until the coils are red hot, and boiling water must then be poured over the surface area. Okay, I'm not sure you have to do that because it's glass. Okay, so because it's glass, I think it just needs to be cleaned thoroughly. You could turn it on and sort of like burn it, but you don't have to throw the water on.
It never touches anything. Why would it even need to be cleaned? You got the whole glass.
Because it's overdress.
Yeah, there
Boils
could be,
over.
yeah, things boil over, etc.
So they get it.
To kosher a microwave oven, the interior must first be cleaned thoroughly with standard cleaners, and after that, an 8-ounce cup of water must be placed in the oven, which is then run on high until the entire cavity fills with steam. The exact time for this will vary from oven to oven because of the differences of size and power, but the usual amount of time needed is roughly 3 minutes after the water has first come to a boil. Okay, so that's actually very easy. And if you keep kosher and you go to a working environment where they don't keep kosher and you want to kosher the microwave, it's very easy. You just clean it, you take a glass of water, you let it overflow, and the microwave is clean.
Yeah, I put a cup of water in for making, say, tea, and it starts boiling in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, toasters and toaster ovens. It is possible to kosher a toaster, but it will usually make more sense simply to buy a new one. Okay, because they're so cheap. Okay, I never kosher a toaster oven or a toaster. It's just impossible. I wrap it up. I have one for Passover and one for the rest. They're not that big. You just store them very easily, and that's that. The same is with mixers, blenders, food processors, and juicers. Most people just have 2 sets for that. It's much easier. The same is for coffee makers, can openers, slow cookers, and knife racks, etc. It's pretty easy to do that as well. Okay, so we now jump to page 331. Errors in the kosher kitchen. Okay, no matter how careful one might be, mistakes will happen. Okay, most fortunately are easily corrected, and even those that cannot be dealt with simply could be corrected with a little more effort, or we just stuck you in the freezer of the community if you make mistakes. Okay. For how long? Well, it depends on what kind of mistake. Depends on what kind of mistake you did. Yeah. So we should note that these corrective actions are after the fact remedies. In Hebrew, it's called bediavad, often pronounced bediavad. One should take care to avoid such situations, but could rest assured that when accidents do happen, the majority could be dealt with easily. Okay, so there are 2 very important concepts that we need to remember here. One is bediavad, which is after fact, and lechatchila, which is before fact. Okay, if after fact a mistake happens, it could be corrected. If beforehand a mistake happens, it is not called a mistake. Okay, yeah, it's like deliberate. So deliberate is I know that if after fact I make a mistake, it can be corrected. So let's just do it. For example, we talked about last week, okay, if a drop of milk falls into a meat pot and there's more than 60 of the volume of the meat compared to the drop of milk, okay, if it happens after fact, that stew could still be kosher, even though we're cooking meat and milk together. However, if I'm a genius chef that just learned about this Jewish craziness, okay, and I say, I have a huge pot of stew that I'm making, let's just put a little bit of butter inside to make the taste better, okay, that is lechatchila. That prohibits you from using that pot of meat. Now you would say, how would you know? Okay. Therefore, the issue of trust in keeping kosher really comes into effect. And therefore, you really need to know that you could trust the person cooking. So that also brings into, you remember we talked about, when you have Gentiles cooking, or sometimes even, it happened more than once and more than twice that secular Jewish chefs, added things that they're not supposed to adding, thinking it could still be kosher, not understanding the difference between b'di'evid, after fact, and lechatchila, which is, as you would say, premeditated, right? Like a premeditated murder, okay, or by accident, right? You have a different punishment for that, and sometimes you can be off the hook even if it's like you killed someone by accident, okay? So the same concept is here as well.
Kill the bull.
Right. So now let's talk about these. We're at the bottom of page 331, the last paragraph. Of course, setting up the kitchen with storage areas clearly marked and working with only one kind of food at a time are the most effective ways to avoid mistakes. What follows is the description of some typical mistakes and their corrective actions. In other cases, the best courses of action will be to contact a rabbi for advice. Okay, so we're now on page 332 at the top. If you have put clean dishes or utensils in the wrong cabinet or drawer, simply put them back in the right place. Okay, you don't have to call the rabbi about that. Okay, just made a mistake. You put it in the right place, and it's
Especially if your cleaning girl does that.
right, exactly. In terms of foodstuffs being mixed together inadvertently, the law distinguishes between mixtures of like and mixtures of like and unlike. Okay, a mixture of like substances, such as kosher and non-kosher beef, is called min bemino. Okay, like and like. Min means we say like sex, but this is like the same sex. Okay, min, so it's like the same kind. So identifying the single non-kosher piece of stew meat of a package of kosher stew meat would be impossible. For such a mixture to be considered usable, therefore, the meat must be reasonably dry and the majority of the meat mixed must be kosher. Okay, so we talked about it a few lessons ago. If I have 3 pieces of meat and I know for sure that 2 of them are kosher and 1 of them is not kosher, okay, but I can't identify it. They look like exactly the same, okay? So I'll ask the new people that just came today, Paul, can you eat those pieces of meat, or do you have to throw them?
You can't have blood on them.
What would you say as a rabbi?
I would say you eat them
You eat them, okay, why?
because we never had enough food.
Oh, okay. Paul, based on his life experience, that we never had enough food, that we eat them, okay? And Paul is actually gonna give
It's not a Jewish question,
not a good,
because the Jews never had enough food, so every single bit counted.
right,
So you cannot throw away food. Food is a sin to dispose of.
oh, okay, that's a very, yeah, okay, so,
If you had enough money to buy a piece of kosher meat in the old country, don't have to worry about a non-kosher piece of meat.
You never had enough.
yeah, there was,
Well,
it's,
So
That's
it's-
true.
so that,
This is a unique country. You cannot compare the Galut
right.
to this country.
Right.
Period.
So I don't know if people on Zoom could hear what Paul said, but basically the concept is that there was never enough food, so you'd always eat it. And although that's not the classic rabbinical answer, that a lot of times the rabbis had that in mind. The rabbis said, people don't have enough food, and if we disqualify that, okay, so people will have less food to eat. So the answer is because the majority of the pieces of meat are two, and there's one that's not kosher, okay, so the majority wins in that sense. And you can eat that meat because the rabbis are considerate of people and that they don't have enough meat. If, however, 9 pieces were not kosher and only 1 piece would be kosher, then you cannot eat that. That is considered non-kosher. But as long as like there's a slight majority for the kosher meat, you can eat it if there's that mixture, as long as it's dry and wasn't all cooked.
You gotta eat.
Well, that's a different story.
Well, but he's talking about having enough to eat. That was a real problem for a lot of people from time to time.
Yeah, and especially in the Holocaust, when people in the Holocaust, people had to eat whatever there was. There's no question of keeping kosher or not kosher in the situation of pikuach nefesh, when you don't have food to sustain you enough that you will die because of that.
What is dry?
Dry means it's not a stew. Okay, it's like 3 separate pieces of meat. Okay, well, we'll see that in a minute. Okay, so mixtures of unlike substances such as non-kosher meat that has fallen into a pot of vegetables is called min b'she'eino. It's not the same sex. And is significantly easier to deal with, as the offending item is far more easily removed and measured. Okay, so the following rules presuppose these distinctions. So if dairy and meat foods were inadvertently mixed together, the laws are more complex. Okay, so if a non-kosher meat falls into the stew of vegetables, you remove it, okay, and then if you're able to also sort of like remove the vegetables that it touched, so you remove them as well, and then you're safe in eating that part. If meat and dairy foods that were cold and dry come into contact, both remain kosher and usable. So if the products were cold but moist to the touch, then the point of contact must be rinsed. After doing so, however, both remain kosher and usable. So if you have a piece of meat touching a piece of cheese, hard cheese, and they touch each other, so you just separate them. You can wash them or wipe it. If it's moist and they kind of like really got stuck together after you separate it, so you cut the part that got stuck together, but the rest could be eaten. That's not considered cooking meat and together with milk.
You rinse the cheese also?
Yeah, whatever you can. So if bread comes in contact with a moist food, the bread may be used only with the same kind of food, be it meat or dairy. That's clear. Yeah?
That, something dairy and a piece of meat falls in, then is the pot, that's the pot, right?
No, you can kosher the pot. You could kosher it.
Okay, so, but it's like meat or dairy.
So what? If you cook meat and dairy together, yeah, so you would wait 24 hours with the pot, and then you go through the whole koshering business.
What about the food?
The food, the food cannot be eaten together unless there's more than 60 in the volume of the other food. Okay.
So if one small piece of
we're gonna read that in a moment. Okay. So if a piece of meat should fall into a pot of milk, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, on page 332. If a piece of meat should fall into a pot of milk, things become still more complicated. If both the meat and the liquid in the pot are cold, then the meat must be immediately removed and rinsed, but both remain kosher and usable. Okay? If it's cold and it's not cooked, it could be usable. So you don't have to throw it right away. If, however, both substances are hot, neither can be used, and the pot itself must be koshered by boiling, as we talked about before. If only one of the two substances is hot, the principle of tata'a gavar, okay, which means tata'a means like the bottom, okay, and gavar is like stronger, okay. So according to which food that falls on or in or is placed on top of another foodstuff acquires the temperature status of the lower food applies as follows. So if the top one of the two was the hot substance, let's say a piece of hot meat will fall onto a bowl of cold milk, the meat must be removed, rinsed, and its top layer pared off, whereupon it may be used. If the bottom, because the bottom one overrides the top one, tata'a gavar. If the bottom of the two was hot, e.g., if cold meat were to fall into a bowl of warm milk, neither could be used, and the pot must be kosher by boiling, because the hot part is at the bottom, so it overrides the colder part, and therefore it needs to be kosher. However, there is a debate in the Talmud. Okay, in the Talmud, there is two rabbis. Okay, very famous, and one says that the bottom one overrides, and the other said no, the top overrides. So the other rabbi would rule differently here as well. So it depends on which of the rabbis you follow. However, tradition over the years have accepted the opinion of the rabbi that says the bottom one overrides. But again, we could look into that in each situation, and we might rule in a different way in each. Why?
Is that a kiva?
No, it's the two rabbis in Babylonia, Rav and Shmuel. Okay.
Paul would say we eat it anyway.
Yeah. Right. And Paul, yeah. So for that reason, for example, so we would take Paul's approach, which is more lenient, and say, if we don't want the food to be wasted, especially if kids are hungry, etc., we make it easier to make it a kosher for people. Okay.
Boil the milk and then.
If the bottom of the two was hot, e.g., if cold meat were to fall into a bowl of warm milk, neither can be used, and the pot must be koshered by boiling. I'm sorry, you read that. However, if the volume of the milk was at least 60 times the volume of the meat, the procedure outlined above may be used even if the milk was hot and the meat cold. Okay? So in that regard, it could be used. If a drop of milk were to fall onto a piece of meat cooking in a pot, the rules are as follows. If the piece of meat was on the surface and the pot had not been stirred since the accident, then the meat is permitted if the volume of the piece of meat was 60 times greater than the volume of the milk which fell on it. If the meat was on the surface and the pot had been stirred since the accident, then the contents of the pot are kosher only if the volume of the contents of the pot is at least 60 times the volume of the piece of meat on which the milk fell. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated, but there are clear rules in that sense. If the volume of the pot is less than 60 times the volume of the meat, the contents may not be used, and the pot itself must be koshered by boiling. Okay, so you're less lucky if it's like a heavy stew and you don't have a lot of liquid in it. So that's create a bigger problem. If the piece of meat on which the milk fell was partially or fully submerged, the rule of batel b'shishim, the annulment of a forbidden or unwanted substance by illicit or desired substance 60 times its volume, applies in such a way that the volume of the entire contents of the pot is measured against the milk. Okay, so you sort of like you have like the milk fell on a piece of meat. Okay, so you measured it against the amount of milk and not against the amount of meat that it fell on. And if one inadvertently uses a utensil for the wrong type of food, the following rules apply. And this is only if it's dirty, according to my opinion. If the contents of the pot are hot and the utensil itself had been used within the previous 24 hours, the food may still be used if the volume of the pot is 60 times the volume of the surface area of the immersed utensils. And again, I would only add if it's dirty. If the volumes of the contents of the pot is less than 60 times the volume of the area of the utensil immersed, the contents may not be used as the utensil itself. If made of metal, must be koshered by boiling. Okay, but again, I would only say for metal food, for metal utensils, I would only say if it's dirty already. Okay, if it's clean, if it came out of the dishwasher or something of that sort, I personally would not apply this more strict rule. If the utensil is made of wood, it cannot be koshered and may not be used. Okay, why? Because wood definitely absorbs the food particles in a very clear way, and then it would go back into the stew. So wood is very problematic. Utensils that have not been used for 24 hours or more may be koshered by boiling. If the utensil is made of heat-resistant plastic, extra care must be taken to scrub it perfectly clean before boiling. Okay, so some authorities say you could kosher the plastic as well. If one inadvertently used a dairy knife to cut hot meat, then the law is as follows. If the knife had been used within 24 hours, it must be koshered. If the volume of the meat is at least 60 times the volume of the portion of the knife which touched the meat, then the meat may be used. If less than 60 times the volume, however, it is prohibited. Okay? I would, again, slightly disagree and say that if it was all clean and came out of the dishwasher, even if it hasn't passed 24 hours, I would say you will be able to use the meat. Maybe you would just cut off the part that the dairy knife touched. And I would again follow Paul's advice that you don't throw food in that situation. If the knife had not been used within the previous 24 hours, the knife must still be koshered, but the meat may be used after paring off the layer of meat the knife touched. Oh, okay, he's basically saying something similar to what I'm saying. The law considers pickling with vinegar-based marinades to be akin to cooking. So there's very interesting debate in the Talmud when you pickle something with vinegar-based. Okay, it's like cooking it. When you're salting something, and sometimes that's a way of cooking as well. When you have that meat, you know, that you soak in salt for a very long time, you like the how do you call that?
Right, right.
Right, but how do you call the meat when you eat it, like the hard meat? What? No,
Steak is
No, no,
called
no.
tatar, but it does not.
the meat that you salt and it becomes dry.
Oh. Pork.
Right?
No, jerky.
Jerky.
Jerky. Yeah, there you go. Jerky, yeah. Not turkey. Okay, so that is considered as well, and then all the laws of keeping kosher apply to that as well, and to all these mixtures as well. Let's move to page 334. To the first paragraph on page 334. There is one important caveat to all the rules mentioned above. One is not permitted to create a prohibited mixture on purpose, even if the proportion of non-kosher to kosher foods will be less, even far less than the crucial 1:60 ratio. An accidental mixture can be corrected, but a deliberate manipulation of the 1:60 annulment rule to circumvent prohibitions cannot be corrected. Also, any portion or piece of food cooked and ready to serve, called chaticha aruya litkabed, cannot be annulled by the 1 to 60 rule. Okay, so if I have now like a nice steak that I'm about to eat, and that falls into a pot of milk, even if there's 60 more ratio to the milk, that cannot be used because it's like a full meal that I'm about to eat. Okay, so it's only with smaller pieces than what I would like consider like a meal. The next part is the concept of netinat ta'am lifgam, which literally means imparting a bad taste, is relevant here. If a bad tasting forbidden substance, something rancid, for example, falls into permitted food, the food remains permitted regardless the ratio of the forbidden substance to the permitted. Okay, and we explained that. You remember we read that when we talked about enzymes and rennet and gelatin. Okay, and we said that even though there's forbidden food in that, it imparts like a bad taste to these things that even a dog wouldn't eat it, and therefore it could be used for cooking in that instance if it's changed its form so much and it's already not edible. Okay, so you remember we talked about the gelatin a few weeks ago? If not, you could go back to the lesson to refresh your memory. So even if the food that fell is not bad tasting by itself, but is so in combination with the food into which it has fallen, the combination also remains permitted. So even if the food did not become bad, but something bad fell into it, but it didn't make it bad, just that combination permits the food to be eaten, even if that part that fell, the bad part, is a forbidden kind of food.
In other words, if you can't taste it.
If you can't taste it, if it doesn't improve, unless it improves the food, it's considered like a bad taste, and then you are allowed to eat it.
It's terrible, you can eat it if it's good. You can't.
Yeah, you might not want to eat it because it might not be healthy, but that we're not talking about health-wise. We're talking about, yeah. A utensil left unused for 24 hours is considered to impart a bad taste no matter what. Okay, so that's why we keep saying that you wait 24 hours before you kosher something, because the concept is that a bad taste was imparted from that dish. Okay, and now therefore, if you mix it when you kosher it, so you're now allowed to eat it because of that so-called mixture that is made. And the most practical application of the principle of imparting a bad taste is the accidental washing of dirty meat and dairy dishes together in a sink filled with soapy water. In this case, the dishes remain kosher after a thorough rinse and waiting the 24 hours. Finally, the principle of ta'am ke'ikar, meaning the flavor is the same as the substance, must also be mentioned. If a piece of forbidden food falls onto permitted food or into a pot of permitted food and still imparts a recognizable flavor, even though subsequently removed, it is considered as if the forbidden food itself was still present. Okay, so that's also very important to understand that if a piece of pork falls into a stew vegetable and I removed the piece of pork, okay, if, however, the taste of the pork is now evident in the stew, in the pot of the vegetables, that cannot be eaten because it's flavored in that way. And again, we're talking only about mistakes. Okay. So you have to remove it really quickly and make sure it's not stirred or anything like that.
I have a
Number one,
question that I
you
have
have
a
pork in the
problem
house, yes,
with
right.
foods that are
Number
not
two.
really pork, but are made to, like, fake bacon stuff,
Fake.
they impart the flavor of bacon.
Well, they try.
Well, okay, try to, and that is permissible, But it seems to me like it destroys the intent of trying to keep kosher and not eating those things.
Yeah, you mean like fake bacons that are kosher, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
But it isn't
sometimes,
pork to begin with.
what?
It's not pork. to
It's
begin
not
with.
pork to begin with, so it doesn't matter that it tastes like, okay? It's fake taste. You're not really tasting it. So that's why it's permissible. Some people say you shouldn't do it because then, you shouldn't be getting ready for the taste, and maybe you'll like it, maybe you'll go for the real thing, etc. But I don't think that's a real concern. The only problem is like with the real piece of bacon or meat, that imparts the real flavor into the dish.
But
Yeah,
on that, let's assume you can't taste pork, but the stew or whatever we're talking about, which the pork has fallen into and removed, tastes better. That means it's unedible, because it's not kosher.
yeah. If it tastes better, that would be problematic.
And you wouldn't know the taste of pork. That doesn't matter. If it tastes better than it tasted before it fell in, then it's not edible.
It tastes better because of the pork.
Right.
Yeah.
But it tastes
Capture
worse.
the essence.
Yeah.
It's
That's
the
a
essence.
qualitative
Well, yeah, exactly.
determination. It's not-
Yeah.
it's not-
So then I don't want to go into the whole thing, but it's very interesting because then the Talmud says, how would you know?
Yeah.
Right? No one asked the question. Oh, you asked the question? Okay. So you know what you do, George? Okay. Don't rock the chair so you don't fall again. Okay. You go to your non-Jewish neighbor and you tell them, can you please taste this and let me know if this had a pork flavor or not? Okay. So yeah, that's what they did in the time of the Talmud. And if he says, oh, that's delicious, I didn't know you started making food with pork. So he said, okay, yeah. Then you say you get to keep it. And then if he says, no, it tastes bad like all the other Jewish food you make, so you say, okay, I'm taking it back. What? You should always have a non-Jewish neighbor for that. Exactly. You need on Passover, you need to give them the chametz, and on Shabbos, on Shabbat, you also, if you forgot to turn on like the light or something, you need them to come in. So every, a Shabbos goy. So yeah, so that's yeah. So just to end that part, so in Rashi's comment on this is Amar Abaye ta'amo velo mamasho be'alma deoraita. Therefore, if a piece of highly seasoned sausage fell on cold pizza, the flavor imparted by it on the pizza would render the pizza non-kosher. Okay, again, unless it was like removed quickly, it wasn't cooked together, etc. So that's that part. Let's talk about, well, if it had enough time, it's imparted the flavor already. It's too late. But if you get it quickly enough, so you're good.
Yeah, but there's a pizza this big, or even this big,
Yeah.
okay? And a piece of sausage fell on that.
I
Somebody
don't-
threw it at you.
But if it's like very warm and sausage is very oily and fatty and it sort of like spreads, you have a problem. Even if you removed it, it sort of like sticks. If it's like fell and you remove it right away, so then it didn't even have a chance to impart the flavor. Okay. Yeah. Pets in a kosher home. Okay. Jewish pets have to keep kosher, George? No, they don't. That's not
Animals are not.
okay. Animals are not obligated by the mitzvahs, and to be honest, they can't be Jewish, except for that very, very rich guy that came to the rabbi, and he told him,
Circumcise his dog.
my dog passed away, and I wanted to bury him, and he said in the Jewish cemetery, he says, sir, like we don't do these things, like we cannot bury a dog in the Jewish cemetery. So he said, okay, I'll just go to the Reform Synagogue with my, $10 million donation, and I'll ask them if they will bury my Shmuley. He said, Shmuley? You didn't tell me your dog is Jewish? Of course we'll bury him, Well, it comes, yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, the other thing that
So-
happens with pets is there are people who are vegan or vegetarian and they don't really, they wanna do that to the dog, but that's not healthy for a dog. A dog needs meat.
Yeah, I would hope that if you're vegan, you would still feed your dog meat, but still there are some kosher issues. Okay, so look at page 334. Since most pet foods are made with non-kosher meats, meat byproducts, or flavorings, it is important to keep pet food away from kosher utensils and dishes. It is not, however, forbidden for Jewish individuals to feed their pets non-kosher food. The laws of kashrut specifically apply to human beings, not to the animals they own. For practical reasons, however, one should maintain a special set of utensils for opening, scooping, and serving pet foods. The situation on Passover is different. Concerned pet owners should consult with the rabbis about the use of pet foods on Passover, as many are made with ingredients they may not be permitted in Jewish homes on Passover, regardless of whether they are ingested only by pets. So on Passover, there's a specific issue that the human beings are not supposed to have chametz in their home, okay? So therefore, some people sort of like move the food outside of the home, and they serve, their pets outside of the home. In Israel, it is possible to get kosher for Passover food. It's not easy. It's just had meat in it with no, bread parts in it. But it's harder to do it because also the dogs, they don't get used to it, etc. So it's a little bit more challenging in that regard. Okay. Okay. We will
Rabbi?
not. Yes.
Okay, Rabbi. In one pet food store, every single year there's a sign that says kosher for Passover. There's the one brand of pet food called Wellness, and it's supposed to have a sign that says kosher for Passover.
Oh,
Their pet food.
I
It's called-
that's really good. Okay, that's really interesting that there is sometimes a kosher food for Passover for dogs, even here. Yeah. Yeah. Now, we next week we will conclude with embracing a kosher lifestyle. And do we have to do it all at once, or could we do it gradually? Then we'll also be dealing with the question of eating in non-kosher restaurants. Okay, now everyone is saying, how come that's not a field trip? Okay, so yeah, how come you only took us to the kosher kitchen? Yeah, we should go to a deli or something like that. Actually, I'm gonna go tonight with my daughter to eat in a non-kosher restaurant, so you could come and watch. But we're only going to eat kosher products, okay? And then we're going to talk about eating in non-kosher homes, okay? Which is a very important question in Jewish families, which is like, how do people someone keeps kosher and someone doesn't keep kosher, can they eat, together in someone who doesn't keep kosher? I think that's a very important question for many of us. So we will deal with that as well. And I think we'll also summarize sort of like the whole mini course we did about keeping kosher. So next week on Wednesday at 12 o'clock. And the following week, we will start with the Jewish life cycle events as well. Should we have like a farewell party from the mini course and everyone bring something kosher? Okay, with all the things that you've learned.
Pork on a glass plate.
Yeah. So if you bring something that you're making at home, you follow the guidelines that we talked about, and the Kiddush committee has they wrote all the guidelines. If you need to know, so you could bring something next week. so we can all enjoy it. And if you don't know what to do, just buy something, okay? If you're buying like a wine, it should have a hechsher, the simple sign. We talked about all the different signs, right? The U and the OU and the different stuff like that. So and someone should bring the bacon bits, my mother says. Okay, the kosher kind.
Bako bits.
Bacon
Bako bits.
Bacon bits, right? Yeah.
Really?
So someone should bring that as well. Actually, my father, who hasn't been to America for years and years already, he doesn't like traveling at all anymore. So last time I came, I know he says, "Oh, I missed bacon bits, the bacon bits." So I got him like 10 packs, 5 packs. They didn't finish it yet, I think. And he even wanted the English muffins. So I got him like 12 packs of that. So anyone going to Israel soon, please make sure to deliver the next delivery to my parents. Okay, that's my mother here in Israel, if you haven't noticed. And I'll just end because Paul is here. I do want to promote the discussion we're going to have with Paul about his life story and about his take today on Israel and the events. Paul is a Holocaust survivor and really built his life here in America, and also has been, a philanthropist in the Jewish community and to Israel. And I think especially post October 7th, it will be very interesting to talk to you, Paul. So I would be sort of like interviewing him. So please come on Shabbat, July 27th, after services at around 11:30. We'll have a Kiddush luncheon, and then at 12, or maybe a little bit before 12, we will start the discussion as well. The evening before, on July 26th, we have Mikey Pauker, who's a great performer and singer, who's going to be leading Friday night services. So that will also be very exciting. Okay? Any questions?
Yes, Rabbi, will the lecture be on Zoom? The one that's going to be after Shabbos? I mean, after Shachris and Mara?
No, I think it's going to be in the social hall. It's not going to be on Zoom.